What are the top defensive coordinator storylines across the NFL entering 2024? We're breaking those down for you today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Joseph, happy. It could go a lot of different ways here. We talk about Pablo Torre complaining about NFL film analysis.
Let's stop. Let's do that.
You want to do that?
Yeah. That was real. That was very interesting that he came out. And what did he say? Basically, like, he's tired of film analysis.
Yeah, we fetish. We have a
jargon
fetish for jargon. Yeah. Which is funny because the incident that he was referring to was the Hard Knocks clip from the combine interviews.
Right.
Where the play is diagrammed on the board. So it's not jargon. It's the name of the play, and the play is drawn on the board for you.
Yeah.
To see what the play is. Tundra, 2 under. That means there's an under, and then the outside receiver runs another under. Right? And H angle is the running back. H, halfback, runs an angle. And not everybody is used to language, NFL play calling, language coding, and stuff like that. But like that can be very interesting. And it was a very unique situation to be in that environment, which is the holy grail of the pre-draft process, right? The interview. Yeah. All we ever tell you, we're not in the room for the interviews. We don't know the players intimately like that. And the contrast of each one of the players for the play that they pick and why they picked it and how they talked about they picked it, I think gave you very unique insights to each one of those guys. I thought it was amazing content.
Here's a take, which is a good reminder that tomorrow is going to be Takes on Takes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's going to be Takes on Takes tomorrow.
And I didn't have a note to remind me.
I didn't until 20 seconds ago, so this is a big development. Tomorrow is Takes on Takes, so please leave a comment on this video with your take. We'll get to the best ones.
In the first 3 minutes, we are going to knock this show out of the park. I can feel it.
So listen, leave us your takes here on YouTube. But the take that I actually have is that we are living in the greatest era of football content that's ever existed. I think, and I push completely back on his comments because the what we're getting from the offseason Hard Knocks, what we're getting from the receivers show that's on Netflix, from the quarterback show Netflix last year, what we're getting from good football film analysis, people like Brett Coleman and what that account does. And there's with
Ted Wynn from The Athletic.
Yeah. And QB School, JT O'Sullivan. This is the great, we got Kurt Warner's talking X's and O's on YouTube. Are you kidding me? This is literally the greatest era of football content. It just looks different, right? It's no longer, hey, we're going to watch whatever NFL Tonight or whatever it is for 30 minutes. And the same people are going to come on and just offer like basic opinions on the narratives that are going on. Football fans want more. They want deeper information. They love the sport. They love their team. They love the players. They want more. They're getting more. And sorry if you just can't understand it.
I think that's a great soapbox that you just hopped up on. And I agree completely. And not everybody consumes the game the same way. It's, it was fun to be a casual hockey fan who just jumped in for a playoff run. And like, I don't know the ins and outs, and I can just be a fan and enjoy it. And if you guys enjoy football that way, more power to you. But there's something for everyone that's out there.
Yeah.
And if you dive into it, you can Google search, you can find some old playbooks that exist on the internet and see what it looks like. And, the other part of the comment from Pablo specifically talking about that Hard Knocks thing was, I don't know if that application or if that skill that Drake May showed in understanding that terminology means he's going to be any good or not. Nobody does until you go out and play.
Right.
But what was impressive for me was the offenses that Drake May played in at North Carolina versus seeing him sit down and say gun right dolphin, blah, blah, blah. Right. And be able to throw it right back to Brian, that from a football, they speak the same language, and that means something. And then when you find out in the build up to the draft, Giants are interested in potentially trading up to 3, and you hear it's Drake May, you see why. So it's not if it means he's going to be any good or not. It's the revelation that they very clearly spoke the same language. And a lot of guys talk about how hard that can be to come into the league, and you have to experience a few systems in order to understand it beyond the terminology and get into the actual concepts that they're running. So it is outstanding stuff from Hard Knocks.
No longer just a poster board on the sideline with a picture on it. And,
right.
And the Ninja Turtle means to do this, right? There's no huddle. Everyone look over here, the whole team.
5 guys with different colored hats, and everybody's looking at the signal from a different colored hat for their position group for what they need to do on every play.
Man, I wonder what that pterodactyl means. You know what I mean?
That SpongeBob mean.
Right.
All right.
Get us into this conversation.
You ready? All right. So we're going to go over defensive coaching staffs and play calling situations. So not everybody has just a defensive coordinator. It's much more heavy in the offensive side of the ball, but we're looking at all of the defensive play caller situations, some of those including head coaches, and we've kind of tiered them out, but it's the conversation is going to be less about the tiers, and it's going to be a little bit more focused in the storylines of the season, right? So we have what we think from a hierarchy perspective it looks like. The application of it for some will be challenging because it's year 1. But you and I generally, Joe, had a consensus of 5 coaching situations that graded out as the tier within the tier, the elite guys. Well, Steve Spagnuolo's kind of the tier within the tier within the tier. Yeah. He was the consensus top guy for both of us. But then you have Jim Schwartz in Cleveland with how good that team has been. Jeff Ulbrich and Robert Saleh with the New York Jets. You have the Mike Macdonald, Aden Durde, Durde staff, and
you're arrested, man. Just
I know the pronunciation police are going to be after me anyway.
Yeah.
The Mike Macdonald staff in Seattle he's the head coach, but you got the big fish to run the scheme, right? As compared to kind of the guys that are out here trying to pollinate it. And then Sean McDermott with a new defensive coordinator in Bobby Babich, who's very highly respected. That 5 is kind of the 5 play caller situations that we, from a grading perspective, had coveted as the peak in the NFL coming into this season.
Spags is unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the personnel turnover that always happens with the Chiefs on defense, the replenishment of defensive backs year over year over year. They say goodbye to guys. It doesn't matter. The big moments, we're talking playoffs, Super Bowls, like this guy dials it up, man. And it's withstood the test of time across multiple places.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just, Patrick Mahomes is a quarterback. It's easy to play defense because the other team feels like they have to score 1 million points and they don't play loose and free. Nah, man, this guy's been unbelievable for a long time. And he continues to pull the right levers in the right moments in the biggest situations in football. I know that the Chiefs dynasty is about Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. I'm not taking anything away from that, but that defense shows up for those guys as well. It makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. I have a question for you, but now's not the right time to ask it. So remind me to ask you about it as it pertains to kind of this core, but then also the next core down of guys that there's a lot of really well-established coordinators at the top of this list, right? When you consider you extend beyond this, and Lou Anarumo, Gus Bradley, Vic Fangio, they're kind of some of the next names that are floating down, along with like Todd Bowles, who's a head coach in Tampa Bay, D'Amico Ryans in Houston. There's a lot of well-proven talent, and I think that's a really fascinating contrast when you consider what just happened this past offseason with Washington going with Dan Quinn as a well-established defensive coordinator that you weren't quite sure was going to get another chance to be a head guy. So I want to ask you that question after the break.
All right. So be sure to stick with us. There's nothing quite like being at the ballpark taking in a Major League Baseball game during the summer. Well, if you want to get there, you got to download the Game Time app. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. And prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. So you can make a last-minute decision to get to a Major League Baseball game. In fact, Game Time offers killer last-minute deals on prices for tickets. They give you an all-in price, view from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. I mean, simply put, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. So snag the tickets without the stress. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
My question for you is this. What well-established NFL defensive coordinator, who is an NFL defensive coordinator in 2024, will be the next to get a head coaching opportunity?
That's fun because we like this coaching cycle. We had that, right? Like,
yep,
we saw some of these guys get these opportunities. Man, I think Jairo Avero in Carolina pops for me. He's done it now in Denver. He's done it in Carolina. I know he's gotten some interviews, especially if, with kind of the questions at edge rusher and corner, if that defense can be strong.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he certainly pops for me as one of the guys next in line to become a head coach that was a coordinator. Like you mentioned, Gerard Mayo just did it. Mike McDonald just did it. We've seen this. This has been more of a thing.
So I guess there's a little bit of a divide there because Avero's never been the head coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was for me the interesting thing about Dan Quinn getting the shot, right? Like Gerard Mayo, there was a succession plan, was kind of head coach and waiting unofficially. Mike McDonald, kind of the latest prodigy play caller. Those guys will always get a shot, right? So if you ask me who on this list that has been a head coach before gets the next shot, I'd probably pick Brian Flores. With him adding to his lexicon, I think was the big thing for Flo because he exhausted all of the head or the offensive coaching staff connections that he had very quickly in Miami. It was out of options. They were doing co-offensive coordinators with position coaches that were on the team the prior year. For him to have bounced around now from Pittsburgh and now Minnesota and kind of get his foot in the door with some of the Shanahan disciples, I think is very helpful for his resume if they continue to perform at a high level defensively. But then if I went with a guy that hasn't been a head coach before, seems like Aaron Glenn's on that trajectory, isn't he?
If they take a step defensively, yeah, I think that he's knocking on the door as well.
I think the Hard Knocks spotlight for them did a lot of service to Aaron Glenn as far as a coach and who he is, and obviously a former player. And that defense has gotten better. You know, they were kind of limited with what they had at times in the secondary last year, and I could see him being somebody that would really connect. Raheem Morris is another example of this kinds of coaches that we're talking about. That was a head coach that and was a well-established defensive coordinator that got another crack. So when those guys get those opportunities is always interesting to me.
Yeah, I agree. And you've even seen some like legacy guys get it, like Mike Zimmer late in his career. Vic Fangio finally got that chance to be a head coach. You kind of wonder, is Lou Anarumo in that conversation? I think he's been really good for Cincinnati, and kind of wonder, I see where your mouse is. Are you about to bring up that name there?
No.
Oh, was gonna say even Dennis Allen did it, right? Like,
Right.
there's a place for these people. You mentioned Flores, and you can mute me at any point that you want,
Okay.
because I don't know what you and I have discussed is allowed to be put out there or not. But like,
Oh, okay.
I kind of feel like the more that we've learned about Flores and the relationships with everything in Miami,
It was bad.
man, like,
It,
do you
it was
think
really
another
bad.
team's going to be like lining up? Like, I'm guessing, I don't know what goes into hiring an NFL head coach, but I'm guessing there's probably some reference checks, right? You probably call up,
Don't call Chris Greer.
don't call Chris Greer, right? Don't call Chris Greer.
Yeah, I think your football operations hierarchy can be a big part of that, right? Like, and Miami wanted to be very collaborative. And Brian Flores is somebody who's off the Bill Belichick coaching tree. As we know, those coaches don't like to play well in the sandbox and have other people make some decisions for them on players that they have to coach. So I think if you're starting blank and you like what Flores does from a scheme perspective, and there's a lot to like, right? And I don't know how far you did or didn't get in the wide receiver series on Netflix, but Devontae Adams was real ticked off playing the Vikings. He's like, man, I got 3 guys on me every single play. And Flores puts together some amazing game plans, right? If you have a blank slate and you choose that you want to hire the head coach first, and the general manager is going to be an extension of the head coach from a football operations standpoint, I think that's the kind of situation in which Brian Flores would make sense. But if you have an incumbent general manager that wants to come in and we're going to hire the head coach, and there's going to be this vertical or even horizontal pecking order as far as your football operations that doesn't have Brian Flores sitting atop the pyramid, it's probably not going to be the right situation for him based off of what we know and what you and I have discussed that we can't really publicly talk about.
Why are you going to sign up for that? It's such a limited way to run your operation. You know what I mean? Like,
because the
I
scheme
think you
kicks
have to
butt.
be collaborative.
Because the scheme kicks butt.
Well, but I hate that though. Like, we talk, like, we know in our heart, we know that it's more about leadership, right, than it is X's and O's, right?
And there were some players there in Miami that loved Brian Flores.
I would expect that. Yeah, I would expect that. But like,
he's a certain kind of coach.
I don't want to limit the people that I can bring in, like, whether it's executives, coaches, personnel, to align with Brian Flores. Like, I can just hire a different coach. Like, I don't have to have Brian Flores.
I would be inclined to agree with you, but it's also what did Flores take from that time and that experience, right? Like, did you learn lessons from that?
These are things that I'd let other people find out. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Patrick Graham's another one who has been getting some head coach interviews for a couple of years. That Raiders defense, especially the back half of the year last year, like, felt like that switch flipped for them, and they got some more talent to work with. He hasn't been a head coach before, but he's somebody who I would look at and kind of be curious if the Raiders kind of replicate what they did down the stretch, if he's not a guy who would get some of that push this up next coming cycle too.
Yeah, I felt like Patrick Graham for a long time has been highly regarded, and maybe you look at some of his defenses and like, I'm not sure the results are really there. I mean, that's starting to come a little bit.
Yeah.
And for the Raiders in particular last year to kind of have some of the defensive success that they had with what was missing up front. I mean, it was Max Crosby and nobody for that defensive line. And guys have really elevated themselves. Like, think about a Robert Spillane and how his career took off there. And even the Divine Diablo transition from safety to line. Like, there's impressive things happen. Nate Hobbs and his development, other DBs like Trayvon Merrick and how he's come along. Like, there's a lot of good that's going on with the Raiders on defense. And so I think you got to tie some of that back to Patrick Graham, and maybe that momentum heats back up for him to kind of get some of those opportunities he had a few years ago.
I have a big observation for you. Want your thoughts on too. We get that after the break.
Yeah, Kyle with the big teases today to get us in and out of the break. So be sure to stick with us. Surely you notice I delayed what I said there to make sure you can find time to find
the right bumper.
Yeah.
The two-sided bumper.
Oh,
Thank you. I appreciate
what a
that.
collaborative growth mindset that we have here on this podcast.
I want to read some names to you that didn't score particularly well just because we don't know a lot about these defensive play callers with their individual resumes. And the teams, it's the teams that's important here. The Baltimore Ravens, Zach Orr. The Miami Dolphins, Anthony Weaver. The LA Rams, Chris Shula. The San Francisco 49ers, Nick Sorensen. The Green Bay Packers, Jeff Hafley. I'm sure we'll get the pitchforks out front of the house again because we asked a question about somebody associated with the Packers or didn't put him as the best defensive coordinator in the league.
I mean, how do you make a case against Jeff Hafley?
Not obviously, he's the greatest defensive coordinator of all time.
I don't see a compelling argument to say otherwise.
We do owe a big apology to Matt LaFleur for having him ranked only as the 7th best head coach because Packers fans are very upset with us yesterday for that. So our sincere apologies to Matt LaFleur for ranking him only as the 7th best coach in the NFL.
The highest ranked coach we had that hadn't been to a Super Bowl.
Right. Our sincerest apologies.
Yeah.
And we hope you'll find in your hearts to forgive us. So Jeff Hafley, please strike him from the list of this conversation. He's the greatest defensive coordinator of all time.
Right.
Teams, a lot of expectations for these teams with some unknown. And San Francisco's defensive coordinator situation's kind of been its own journey the past few years. It feels like they're just biding time for it to not work out in New York with Robert Saleh so he can go back. It's just kick butt there, right? But what do we make of these teams that Baltimore lost the golden goose? Well, Miami went from Vic Fangio to a different kind of scheme with a guy in Anthony Weaver who was a defensive coordinator for 1 year in Houston, and it wasn't particularly good. The Rams lose Raheem Morris and go with Chris Shula. The 49ers, another defensive coordinator. They have the talent. I'm sure they'll be fine, but it's like, what do we know about these guys?
Yeah, I think so. The point that you're making is that you have teams that have expectations that also have very unknown commodities taking over the defense with really most of those being teams with offensive-minded head coaches, right? This is critical stuff here.
Well, 4 of these 5 teams are Shanahan coaches.
Right. So, I mean, we got to find out. That's what it comes down to. I think there's reasons to be intrigued about all of those people in all of those places, but they're not all going to work out. I mean, the coordinator turnover in the NFL offensively and defensively is crazy every single year. And I think those are big X factors for all of those teams meeting the expectations that they have. I'm excited about a lot of them, though. I mean, candidly, I really am.
Yeah, I don't invoke that question to say, hey, I think these are going to be disaster situations or there's going to be big regressions for some of these teams, but it's just the expectation of the team and the element of the unknown with a lot of young coaches stepping into big roles it's a fascinating subplot to some of the teams that you hear associated with the top of each conference.
The NFL liked that Ravens defense, man.
As they should have.
Right. They were number 1 in scoring, all the turnovers that they had, a lot of breakout players, young developing. It's all good. It's all very good. And so you see Mike Macdonald go from being the defensive coordinator there to being the head coach in Seattle, which is interesting because he didn't bring any of these guys with him to be the defensive coordinator. He hired the Cowboys defensive line coach to be his DC.
Smart
Weaver,
not to say his name, so the pronunciation.
Anthony Weaver. I'm not going to call him Rashad. I thought about it. I really did. Anthony Weaver goes to Miami. That feels like an overdue promotion for him to become a defensive coordinator. He was the assistant head coach as well, if I'm not mistaken,
associate head coach
for the Ravens last year. Then you have Zach Orr, who takes over. He was part of the staff. He's now the defensive coordinator. And then Dennard Wilson goes to the Tennessee Titans to be their defensive coordinator. So 4 NFL defensive coordinators on that staff from last year.
And if those guys have, bye, Joe. Anyway, welcome back, Joe.
Thank you. Yeah.
For those who aren't watching on YouTube, Joe left on me there for a hot second, got me a little rattled. If those guys all have success, Mike Macdonald has a chance to have the most robust coaching
ever
tree as a guy who's like hardly been a head coach ever. Like by the time, I don't know how many years were on his contract to be the Seahawks head coach, but like by the end of his first contract with the Seahawks, if things go well, he might already have like 3 or 4 other guys across the league as head coaches because of all the opportunities that these guys getting out here so earlier, and they're all young guys.
I'd have to do the research, but like Jesse Minter as well was, he was, of course, the Michigan D coordinator, right, but he spent several years as an assistant in Baltimore before that. He's taken over as the Chargers defensive coordinator, which is interesting. Junior Colson coming over and being the linebacker there, probably the starting Mike linebacker. But like, yeah, right. Ravens defense is like the Shanahan offensive tree or whatever, like how that's kind of like populated the league. People want what that Ravens defense did last year.
Yeah. I feel like I've had a lot to say in this show, and I feel bad that I haven't left a lot of door open to open segments for you, and then we go down the rabbit hole. Like, what do you have that we haven't touched on?
We've touched on a lot of the things that I had. I think just from a compelling perspective, how about Mike Zimmer back? He's back in the fray, and he goes to Dallas, replacing Dan Quinn. And I think the question, at least the question that I have about that is of course Micah Parsons, and what does his role look like? And I think you kind of go back to maybe what Zimmer did with Anthony Barr in Minnesota, and maybe you can draw some parallels there. That. I think that's helpful for a Parsons. But like, I'm hopeful that defense can become more firm, because while I think structurally to be kind of similar in terms of alignments, but like, I thought Dan Quinn sacrificed and does sacrifice too much size and mass in the name of speed and up the field, right? Like I think he's always kind of struggled to find that blend. Obviously, Seattle and what they had going on was historic, but like maybe since then it's been like, do you have the right mix of skill sets to be a sound defense?
Or if you don't, are you willing to structurally change your fronts to be able to match a little bit better and have a little bit different spacing distribution as compared to having safeties playing linebackers and playing 4 down and having guys getting blown back into your lap for 220-pound linebackers?
I also want to extend to you a question that you asked me yesterday.
Okay.
Is there a situation here where you feel like there's just a lot of pressure for a particular coordinator? They could be a new one this year. It could be kind of a returning one, but like, where do you feel there's a lot of heat to come through? I'll give you my answer while you consider it. I think it's Shane. I think it's got to be Shane Bowen and the Giants. Things got dicey with Wink there. Wink has got the weirdest shot. Where is he doing now? I forgot where he went. I got it now. I can't even continue.
Is he in college?
Yeah, is it Ohio State or Michigan or something like that? Oh God, people are yelling at us.
Michigan. He's a defense coordinator in Michigan.
Michigan.
So all these guys are just trading jobs from Michigan to the NFL.
Wait, what is happening here? And of course, Baltimore. There's a parallel there, right? Baltimore, Wink. Okay,
the Harbaugh coaching family, right?
Never ends. Yeah. Shane Bowen going over to the Giants, man. We think of this in general as a make or break year for that regime, but like, so much of that's going to be rooted in the defense, and like, do they even have enough secondary talent, right? Like, there's so many questions with that Giants defense in a year they got to get it right. So I think Shane Bowen, I'm interested in Shane Bowen. I like a lot of what that defense was in Tennessee, creative with a lot of like multiple safety looks, and they stopped the run extremely well. And I think Dexter Lawrence is going to thrive and all that. But I think there's a lot on Shane Bowen stepping into this situation to produce right away.
Can I say Vance Joseph in Denver?
Say whatever you want.
And I don't know if it's more about like the expectations for the Broncos as a team, but they did not start well defensively last year. And there was some talk of like, we got to make some changes, right? And for Vance Joseph, say what you will about his resume and as a head coaching candidate, this is not a defensive unit that has a lot of successful metrics in their favor throughout the course of 8 years as a head coach / defensive play caller in the NFL, right? Last year, this team was 29th in yards, 27th in points. They were 12th in takeaways. They were dead last in the league in yards per attempt in the run game. They were 28th in touchdowns allowed passing the ball. They were 26th in net yards per attempt defending the pass. They've made some personnel changes, but they've said goodbye to Justin Simmons, and it's like, for me, like, you were once upon a time like a really hot name to be a head coach, and then it didn't work. And then you went to Arizona and it started really bad, and then it was okay, and then it ended bad, and now it's bad starting in Denver. It's like just the fork in the road for where it's going to go for Vance Joseph. I think this is a big year for that. And I think that's why he's the first name that, as I'm looking at the list, came to mind.
2 follow-ups on that real quick. Sergio Dip, never forget pouring. I mean, just an absolute legend.
I saw him recently doing something. Like,
Was
not
he
in
having
person, not
the
in person.
time of his life.
He was having the time of his life.
Here he is. Unbelievable moment.
On this night, having the time of his life.
Now I'm going to lose a bunch of my afternoon watching that clip 1,000 times. I think this is another fascinating layer to this. We know that Sean Payton likes his guys. Dennis Allen gets fired as the head coach of the Saints. And Vance Joseph stinks as the defense coordinator of the Broncos. Like,
that's
you tell me what's going to happen there.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, all right.
That is anything else?
Oh, I'm good.
That's our storylines on defense for the NFL and their play caller situations across the league this year. As we mentioned at the top of the show, tomorrow is Takes on Takes, which is where we give our take on your take. It's like a mailbag. So leave your comments here on this YouTube video with your takes. Don't tweet us. Don't email us. Don't Instagram DM us. Don't send snail mail to our houses. Leave a comment on this video with your take around football or otherwise that you want to hear us react to tomorrow on the show. We will take the best ones. We will respond to them here on the show. We have that to look forward to tomorrow to bring this week to a close. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He's Joe Marino. We appreciate you guys checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. We're out of here.